All right, so we're diving into Bitcoin. Everyone's been asking for it, and we're finally doing a deep dive on this whole cryptocurrency thing.
Definitely a popular request.
Yeah, so we're going to get into Bitcoin, like its whole history, how it went from basically nothing to, this global phenomenon.
It's a wild story, too.
Oh, yeah? Even for you?
Even for me, and I thought I'd heard it all when it comes to, tech and finance.
So where do we even begin with something like this? Like, before Bitcoin was even a thing, before 2008, what was the deal? Were people just walking around using cash and credit cards and, that was it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you still had those traditional systems,
Yeah.
but there was this kind of underlying desire for something else, like something outside of those established systems.
Okay, so people weren't totally happy.
Right, and you even saw a few attempts at creating digital currencies, way back then.
Really? Like what?
So you had things like B-money and BitGold, which, looking back, are really interesting because they show you that these ideas, this desire for a decentralized digital currency, it was there all along.
But it just, never took off.
Yeah, the tech wasn't quite there yet. And to be honest, I don't think the world was ready to embrace something that radical.
And then the 2008 financial crisis happened.
Exactly. Suddenly, everything changed. People started questioning those traditional systems, really questioning them.
And that's where Satoshi Nakamoto enters the picture, right?
Yeah.
2008. This mysterious figure just drops the Bitcoin white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And it's like, boom, here's the future.
It was a bold move, for sure.
Yeah, and mysterious. We still don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is.
Right. Which just adds to the whole mystique, I guess.
Okay, so this white paper, I've tried to read it. It's pretty technical, but what's the gist?
Well,
What was Nakamoto actually proposing?
it was more than just a new currency. It was a whole new system.
A new system.
Yeah, a system based on this radical idea. Decentralization.
Decentralization meaning?
Meaning no one's in control.
Yeah.
Not the banks, not the government, no one. Everyone has a say, or at least that's the idea.
Okay, so how does that actually work in practice? We're talking about money here, right? People need to trust that this thing is legit.
That's where blockchain comes in.
Blockchain. All right, break that down for me, because I feel like everyone throws that word around.
So basically, imagine a digital ledger, right? But it's not stored in one place. It's spread across tons of computers all over the world. And every single transaction, every time someone sends or receives Bitcoin, it's recorded on this ledger.
So anyone can see it.
Exactly. It's completely transparent.
Isn't that risky? Couldn't someone just hack in and change things?
That's the beauty of it. It's virtually impossible to tamper with because you'd have to hack into, thousands of computers simultaneously to even have a chance.
Okay, that makes sense, and I guess that's why people were so intrigued by this. But, did anyone even use Bitcoin back then? Or was it just, a bunch of computer nerds playing around?
Well, it started with those early adopters, for sure.
The diehards.
Yeah. 2009, you had the Genesis block being mined, which was the very first block on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Genesis block sounds biblical.
Right. It's like the big bang of Bitcoin.
So what was Bitcoin even worth back then? Were people buying things with it, or?
Well, there's this famous story, this kind of legendary moment in Bitcoin history, the pizza purchase.
Pizza. Tell me more.
So in 2010, this guy buys 2 pizzas using Bitcoin. Sounds pretty ordinary now, right?
Yeah. I mean, I order pizza online all the time.
Right. But back then, it was huge.
Because it was the first time someone had used Bitcoin to buy something in the real world.
Exactly. It showed that Bitcoin could have actual value, that it could be used money.
Okay, so what did these pizzas cost? 10 Bitcoin?
Try 10,000 Bitcoin.
10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas.
You see what I mean about a wild story?
That's insane.
That's Bitcoin, my friend.
10,000 Bitcoin for pizzas. I'm still stuck on that. But I guess after that, everyone wanted a piece of the pie, right?
Oh, yeah. That pizza purchase was like a signal flare. People started to see the potential, and it wasn't just about Bitcoin anymore either.
What do you mean?
Well, this is when you started seeing all the altcoins popping up, alternatives to Bitcoin.
Altcoins, right? What were some of the big ones back then?
Litecoin was one, Namecoin, there were a bunch, each one trying to improve on Bitcoin in some way or offer something different.
So it was like the Wild West out there, everyone with their own cryptocurrency idea.
Exactly. It was this whole movement, this idea that we could rebuild the financial system from the ground up. People were excited about the possibilities,
Kind of exciting in a way, right?
Yeah.
Anything is possible.
It was a heady time, for sure.
But not all of those altcoins could have survived, right?
No, definitely not. Most of them faded away pretty quickly.
So what about Bitcoin? Was it smooth sailing after the pizza days?
You kidding? This is Bitcoin we're talking about. There's always something.
Oh, right, the crashes. I remember hearing about a big one in 2013.
Yeah, that was a rough one. Bitcoin had just hit like $1,000 for the first time and everyone was going crazy and then boom, the price just crashed.
So what happened? Did people just get cold feet?
It was partly that and partly, the fact that the whole thing was still so new and unregulated.
Right, like it was the Wild West, but with money.
Exactly. People didn't really know what they were getting into, and when things started to go south, everyone panicked.
So not exactly a stable investment at that point.
Not at all. It was the definition of volatile. And then, just to make things worse, you had the Mt. Gox hack in 2014.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Wasn't that a huge deal?
Huge. Mt. Gox was like the Bitcoin exchange at the time, and suddenly it just goes offline.
Wait, so what happened?
They got hacked. Hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin just gone.
Seriously. Gone, like poof.
It was a disaster for Mt. Gox and for a lot of people who had their Bitcoin stored there.
Wow, okay, so if there's one takeaway from that, it's that security is kind of important in this world.
Kind of important. It's essential. That's something you learn really quickly in the crypto space. Never underestimate security.
Got it. Lesson learned.
But even with the crash and the hack, things didn't slow down for long. In fact, you could argue that this is when things started to get really interesting.
How so? What happened?
Well, 2016, that's when Ethereum came onto the scene.
Ethereum. Okay, we have to talk about Ethereum because that feels like a whole other deep dive.
It is. It definitely is. But in a nutshell, Ethereum took this idea of blockchain and said, we can do more than just currency with this.
Like what kind of more?
Like smart contracts, decentralized applications, the whole 9 yards. It was about building a whole new internet, basically.
So kind of a big deal then.
Yeah, you could say that.
And this is also when ICOs started happening, right? Initial coin offerings.
Yeah, the ICO boom. Suddenly, everyone and their grandma was launching a token.
Was it all legit?
Some of it, maybe, but a lot of it, let's just say there were some questionable projects out there.
So kind of like the Wild West, but this time with digital tokens instead of gold.
The analogy holds up. And, through all of this, Bitcoin was still there in the background.
Just chugging along.
Chugging along and actually doing pretty well. The ICO craze actually helped fuel another Bitcoin surge in 2017. It hit $10,000, then $19,000. People were going nuts.
But then another crash in 2018. It's like this market just can't catch a break.
Or maybe it can't help but take breaks, big ones. That's the nature of volatility, especially in a market as new and untested as crypto.
So what happens next? Does Bitcoin finally calm down after 2018?
Well, if you think about it, we haven't even gotten to the really crazy stuff yet.
Okay, so Bitcoin's been through crashes, hacks, even this whole Wild West phase with the ICOs, and through it all, it just keeps coming back for more.
It's resilient, that's for sure.
But what happens when you throw a global pandemic at it? We're talking 2020 now, right? Like the world shuts down, everything goes haywire. What happens to Bitcoin then?
Well, it's interesting because initially Bitcoin actually plummeted right along with the stock market.
Really? So much for being a safe haven.
Yeah, a lot of people thought that too, but then something really interesting happened. It not only recovered, it surged to new all-time highs by the end of 2021.
So are you saying Bitcoin actually benefited from the pandemic?
It's hard to say for sure, but there are definitely people who believe that.
Like, what were they thinking?
Well, some people saw it as this kind of hedge against inflation, right?
Yeah.
Because governments were printing money like crazy, and Bitcoin has this fixed supply.
Right, it's like digital gold that way.
Exactly, and then you had all this uncertainty in the traditional financial system.
So Bitcoin starts to look more appealing.
Right, especially for people who are already skeptical of the banks and the government, And then right in the middle of all this, you have El Salvador making Bitcoin legal tender.
That was a trip. I remember that.
It was huge. The first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as an official currency.
It's like one giant experiment.
Totally. And it's still playing out, so we'll see what happens. But it definitely made people stop and take notice.
Speaking of taking notice, wasn't there some drama with Elon Musk and Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah. How could we forget about Elon?
Like the entire crypto market hangs on his every word.
Pretty much, and he's not exactly known for being predictable.
Oh, what happened?
Well, for a while there, he was super into Bitcoin. Like, Tesla even bought a bunch of it and started accepting it as payment, and then he kind of backtracked.
Because of the environmental concerns.
Right, the whole energy consumption thing with Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
A whole other deep dive, maybe.
Exactly. So after this whole roller coaster ride, this deep dive into the history of Bitcoin, what have we learned?
I mean, where do we even begin? I think one big takeaway is that security is paramount in this space.
Yeah, no kidding after that Mt. Gox story.
Right. And it's not just exchanges, it's your own personal security, too. You have to be careful, do your research, and protect yourself.
Because it's the Wild West out there still.
Let's just say the Wild West never really ended. And the other big takeaway, which I think we've seen time and time again, is just how volatile Bitcoin is.
That's putting it mildly.
Right. It goes up, it goes down, sometimes it goes way up, sometimes it goes way down. And that's just the nature of the beast.
Just buckle up.
Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Because even with the risks, even with the volatility, Bitcoin has shown us something really important.
What's that?
It's shown us that a decentralized digital currency, something outside the control of governments and banks, it's possible.
It's a whole new world out there.
That's for sure.
And Bitcoin is just the beginning. Who knows what the future holds, but it's definitely going to be interesting. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this deep dive for today.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground from those early days of pizza purchases to El Salvador making it legal tender. It's been a wild ride.